Hello, nerds! Nerds for Yang. I have to be a little quiet because I'm actually recording at 5 a.m. local time. I was traveling overseas in beautiful city of Tokyo and just got back into Zurich and am a little bit jet lagged. So got up at like 4 a.m. and thought, well, if you can't go back to bed, you might as well shoot a Nerds for Yang video. So we are going to give you a quick update on the state of the Yang 2020 campaign. We're going to go over polls, debate qualification for December, Google searches, social media growth, mainstream media coverage, and election betting odds. And hopefully this is useful to you. Let's get right into it. Let's start with the polls. And what you see here is the last poll as of this shooting is November 20th. And it shows Yang at 4, which is actually pretty encouraging because if you look at his previous 3 polls, he was 2, 2, and 3. And the previous polls, he was behind Harris in every one. So now he's ahead of Harris, ahead of Bloomberg. He was behind and tied with Bloomberg in the previous 2 polls. And he's just a few points behind Buttigieg. So he's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th place nationally, according to the Emerson poll. Now, if you want to go back further, you'll see that this might be the first national poll in a long time where he's actually ahead of Harris. I can't go back far enough, at least just scanning this. Wow, this is quite a momentous. He was tied with Harris on October 7th, but I don't see one where he's actually beat her. Wow. Okay, so that's kind of a big deal. Now, obviously, this is one poll. Emerson tends to seem to treat Yang favorably. I don't know if the demographic that they're going after may be more representative of the Yang gang, but kudos to everyone and to the campaign. Looks like for the first time, at least in several months, of being number 5 nationally ahead of Harris. So it goes Biden, Sanders, Warren, Buttigieg, Yang, then Harris, then Gabbard, then Steyer, then Bloomberg. And then, of course, Booker and Castro are way in the back. So exciting. So that's national. What about for statewide polls? Let's go to Iowa. Looks like there was one on November 19th. Here you have us at 4, again ahead of Harris, but now Klobuchar is doing pretty well in Iowa. So we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in Iowa behind Klobuchar. Wow, look at Buttigieg, 26. Buttigieg looks like he may have a big day in Iowa unless something happens. And with this race, you can see here from the chart that nothing is really guaranteed. Although this purple one, this ascending purple line is pretty clear trend with Buttigieg. And then you see this green one kind of diving down. That's Biden. Ooh, look at this. Harris at one point in Iowa was 16, and now she's 3 behind Yang. Interesting times in Iowa. I'm encouraged. That we're ahead of Harris. And, Klobuchar is pretty strong. She's from Minnesota, and that's close to Iowa. So let's look at New Hampshire. New Hampshire, we've got one from November 18th. Ooh, that one's a tougher one to read. So that one we are at 2. Whoa, not in a great place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 9th place behind Booker in New Hampshire. So who knows? Maybe we're spending more of our TV ad dollars in Iowa than New Hampshire. And that explains why you see some strength in Iowa and less in New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, looks like this purple line. Oh, Buttigieg. Buttigieg. So Buttigieg is surging in New Hampshire as well. And who's diving down? You've got Warren dropping from 27 to 20. You've got Biden dropping from, at one point, 34 to now 19. But you can't ignore the fact that we are way at the bottom at an average of 2.3. If you look at more data, there was one where in CNN at the end of October had us at 5, tied with Gabbard and Klobuchar and half of Buttigieg. But no way to dress this one up, guys. We got to get to work in New Hampshire. So anybody who's canvassing and volunteering in New Hampshire, thank you. We need everything we can get. Now let's look at South Carolina. You know what? Someone keeps telling me, like, hey, why do you always do South Carolina before Nevada? So fine, we'll do Nevada next because it actually technically happens before South Carolina. I think that might be a new thing. I never remember Nevada being in the first three. In Nevada, we are at three, which puts us one, two, three, four, five, number six behind Steyer. Look at Steyer. You know, I kind of like Steyer. I know obviously he's not super popular with voters, but he seems like a nice guy putting his money behind good causes. I wish and secretly hope that we can, as a Yang gang, adopt Steyer and convince Steyer to back Yang. I think that would be amazing. Imagine what the Yang 2020 campaign would look like if we had Steyer's air power. Oh my God, forget about it. But, you know, in Nevada, we're three. Previously, we're 1, 3, and 5. Good old Emerson. But, you know, that's not fantastic. I would say the highlight is certainly national polls being number 5, jumping ahead of Harris, and Iowa. I think Iowa ahead of Harris is also a good sign. And let's look further down to South Carolina. We've got one from November 17th. We're at 4. Okay, ahead of Harris. So we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, number 6 behind Steyer. Steyer, man, he's you know, say what you want about him spending money, but it's getting him results. And we're only 2 points behind Buttigieg in South Carolina. Buttigieg is so weak in South Carolina compared to how well he's doing in Iowa and to some extent New Hampshire. How is he doing in Nevada? Old Buttigieg. Buttigieg is 8 in Nevada. Not incredibly powerful relative to what he's doing in Iowa and New Hampshire. I wonder if that's because Buttigieg has trouble with Hispanics, African Americans. And I think that's something where you might see Yang surprisingly do way better than a lot of candidates, even Booker and Harris among African American voters. Let's take a chance here. I'm going to look at some national data. I haven't prepared for this, so we're going to unbox it together. Okay, now I have downloaded the full results of the latest Emerson November national poll, and I wanted to just call out some of the more interesting stuff. Will you definitely vote for your candidate, or is there at least a chance you could change your mind? 55% are locked in, but 44%, almost half, are open to changing their mind. So you could argue the race is still pretty fluid. If half of the people who say they're supporting one candidate are willing to move, let's say, to Yang, that's basically, you know, Yang could easily, if he got all of the people's mind, all the mind changers, he could easily jump to number 1. There's a line of sight to that. Obviously, it's not probable that he would get all the mind changers, but somebody's going to have to get it at the end of the day. Who did people vote for in the last primary? A lot of Hillary, but a good 1 out of 3 were Bernie supporters. So that, I think, explains Bernie's kind of strong base, why it's hard for him to drop off since so many people wanted him last time. How likely are you to vote for the Democratic nominee in the general if he was not your first choice? So if they don't get their first choice, will they still support, you know, kind of like the never Trump kind of argument? And what's interesting is that, wow, you would have thought that more than 67% would say they were very likely to support the Democratic nominee no matter what. So that means that, wow, about a third may not vote for the Democratic nominee if their first choice isn't selected. Now, if you add the somewhat likely, then you're going to get to a total of 82.7% that are pretty much guaranteed. That then suggests that 18 or 17.3%, which is a sum of these guys, are unlikely, at least somewhat unlikely, to vote for the Democratic nominee, which, if you're the head of the DNC, is a big problem. Like, whoever gets the nomination, I mean, I would argue, guys, we cannot have another 4 years of Trump. Like, I'll take whoever. Would I take Warren? I'd hold my nose, but I'd do it. Okay, anyway, should Hillary Clinton run? Seriously? 24% of people think Hillary Clinton should run? Oh God, this is crazy. Should Bloomberg run? 60% say no, 16% say yes, 24% say they're not sure. These are the one-on-one matchups where you see Trump beating or being tied with any Democratic nominee. You see in the Democratic nomination process, you got 14% African American, 12% Latino. So that's 26.4% Black or Hispanic. One out of every four, more than one out of every four primary voters. And the fact that Buttigieg and Warren and frankly Harris and frankly Harris and Booker are struggling with minority voters is a problem. Most people that are voting in the primary are 30 to 49 years old. That's the number one demographic, which is a problem because I think Yang does way better with 18 to 29, which is the third most popular demographic. You see this 50 to 64, I would imagine that's Biden town, maybe 30 to 49 might be Buttigieg, Klobuchar town, and then 18 to 29 is Yang town. Highest level, most common education is some college and college grad, which is, I think, pretty good for Yang. He does well with college grads. The most popular ideology is moderate, which is really interesting. I think bodes well for Yang, but I don't know if that's representative of who's going to be voting in the primaries. Let's see. What's the number one issue to people? The economy, followed by healthcare. That's interesting, the economy. We talk so much about healthcare in these debates, but we don't really talk about the economy as much. And if you want to argue someone can do well for the economy, I would say it would be Yang's UBI. That would probably be the biggest stimulus the economy has ever seen. Okay, here's Yang's. Of those who were surveyed, Yang has 57.6% of his support is from males, 42% female. So this is a continuing challenge for Yang. If you look at Biden's support, it's actually 61% female and 39% male. Warren has almost 70% female support. Within her supporters, 70% are female. So who is doing worse among females than Yang? Booker. Wow, he's really struggling with females. Geez, Harris is getting crushed. She only has 18% of her supporters are female. Tulsi Gabbard, only 13% of her support is female. Yikes. All right, so relative to some other candidates, Yang's doing better with females, but not as well as Biden and Warren. What about Klobuchar? Where's Klobuchar? Klobuchar are all 70% female. So Klobuchar and Warren have about 70% female. God, Harris is just not doing so good with the females. In terms of independents and Republican support for candidates, you've got who has the most Republican support? Interesting. Booker, Yang, Klobuchar. 30% of her supporters are registered Republicans. Interesting. What is Warren doing with Republicans? 2%. What about Biden has 9%. Sanders has 1%. So basically, Sanders and Warren, there's almost no hope of them getting Republicans. What about independents? You got, interesting. Yang has more Republican supporters than independents. Who has the most independents as a percentage of their total support? Gabbard, Steyer. Yeah, I would say Booker. I mean, these are very small counts now. We're really shaving it down. But how many of our people are Yang or nothing? So 68% of our supporters are for sure definitely voting for Yang. 31% might change their mind. There's a chance. Whereas who has the biggest for sure? Actually, we're doing pretty good with 68. Well, Bernie has 70% for sure. Yang has 68% for sure. Patrick has 100% for sure. Steyer has 92% for sure. So basically, if you're Yang, if you're in the Yang gang, chances are this is for sure you're with him and you're not likely to change your mind. Whereas only 30% of Buttigieg supporters are for sure for Buttigieg and less than half of Warren supporters. So I could argue Warren and Buttigieg have kind of a weak base, especially compared to Yang and Sanders and even Biden. Booker is kind of a weak base too. So that's good for news for us. Let's see what else we have here. Where the heck is a Hispanic? Okay, let's look at the cut now by ethnicity. And what you see here is if you are Hispanic, you are most likely to support Sanders, then Biden, then Warren. And Buttigieg, Harris, and Yang are somewhere between 0 and 3% of Hispanic voters. Castro's 2.5%. So you got a vast majority of Hispanics really gravitating towards Bernie. Bernie is the winner of the Hispanic primary. Now you look at white voters. Where are most of the white voters going to? They're a little bit more evenly spread. I would say 28. Looks like 28 is the biggest one. Who is that? Sanders. So Sanders is leading the white and Hispanic. If you look at African American, that's where you see Biden. Actually, Biden is the strongest with African Americans. 42% of African Americans are going for Biden, and 0% Deval Patrick, 5% Harris, 0.4% Booker. So that's interesting. With Booker, he's really struggling with the black vote. Now with Asians, you've got Yang with 29%, but he's not leading with Asians. You know who's leading with Asians? Sanders. Wow, look at this. I mean, now we've got Sanders winning with Hispanics, white, and Asians. And you've got Biden leading with Black or African Americans. So basically, two white men are leading the minority vote support, which is kind of interesting. Of multiple races, you've got Biden 42 and Yang at 6. Yeah. Wow. Who would have thought that Biden and Sanders are the candidates of minorities, even though we have minority candidates running? In a weird way, I think that's kind of progress. And then of 18 to 29-year-olds, who's leading there? Sanders at 40, Yang at 9. Yang is, and Warren at 13. So Yang's doing good with the 18 to 29s, but not as good as Bernie. With 30 to 49-year-olds, Bernie's at 35, Yang's at 5. So Bernie's winning the younger set. And the older set, 50 to 64, Biden, wow, really strong, 43%. And then of the retired set, 65 or older, again, Biden. So that's really interesting. The Biden coalition is older people and African Americans. Who would have thought? There you go. And then of educated people, who's winning that primary? With, let's say, college grads. Woo, Bernie, 28. And you've got Yang at 5. Everybody else in the 10-ish range. Warren 17, Biden 23. So Bernie's got the college grads. What about post-grad? Who's winning the post-grads? You've got Biden. Looks like Biden might be Warren. Warren's got the most post-grads, 39%. And Yang has 3% post-grads. And then of the very liberal, Sanders for sure wins the very liberal, somewhat liberal. Warren doing well, moderate. Biden, somewhat conservative. What? Warren is pulling somewhat conservatives. That's weird. And very conservative, Biden. And then from Yang's point of view, we do best with the somewhat liberal and very liberal. Still haven't really broken through the moderates and somewhat conservatives. Although I imagine that as we get more well-known, we will. Wow, I could do this forever. And then for the people for whom the economy is the most important, they support, looks like Biden at 25, Yang at 8, though. Wow. Actually, for people who care about the economy, Yang might be number 4 behind Biden, Sanders, and Warren. But more for people who care about the economy, Yang has more support than Buttigieg. For people who care about impeachment, Biden's the leader. For people who care about social issues, looks like Biden's the leader. For people who care about healthcare, wow, Biden is doing better than Sanders and Warren for people who care about healthcare. I guess that goes to show you whether they really believe in the Sanders and Warren single payer plans. For people who care about immigration, looks like Sanders at 23 and Harris at 11. Interesting. Yang's not pulling anybody for whom immigration is their top issue. Gun control, wow, Sanders 53%. If you care about gun control, you probably support Sanders, interestingly. Terrorism, Biden. Environment, Sanders, wow, 38%. Education, Biden, Well, Biden's really leading on a lot of the policy issues. I think that's enough of the breakdown. Hopefully that was interesting to you. It certainly was interesting to me. I think the biggest takeaways from those crosstabs are, one, that Biden has stronger support from older people, 50 and up, and African American voters. Bernie is leading with Hispanic voters, and Yang does pretty well with people on the economy. I think he's number 4. But also, I was surprised he wasn't doing better with Hispanic voters and people who care about immigration, because we've seen previous polls where that was a strong suit of his. But that's the latest polling data. Okay, next, let's look at the debate qualifications. So we've got the December debates coming up in, I believe they are in Los Angeles, and you need 4 polls at 4% or more, or 2 at 6% or more. And right now we have 3 polls at 4% or more. So we're on the cusp. We need one more. Well, this 3 needs to turn into a 4, and we are locked into the December debate because we've already met the donor threshold. We just need to meet one of these 2 columns here. Klobuchar has already qualified. So right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 have qualified, plus 3 that are on the cusp: Steyer, Gabbard, and Yang. It looks like there's a good chance Booker will not be on stage with us in December, assuming we make the stage, which would be interesting. Castro will not make the stage. It'll be heavily kind of winnowed down. So it'll likely be Biden, Warren, Sanders, Buttigieg, Harris, Yang, Klobuchar, and maybe Gabbard. Probably Gabbard. So that'll be really nice to have 1, 2, 3 if Steyer gets on 9. So less than 10 people on stage. I think that would be the smallest debate we've seen. But we need to get one more state or national poll with 4% or higher, and we're not there yet. But by the way, some of these things like the DNC doesn't count every poll, but that's where we're at now. I would imagine we will get one more poll before December 12th. Right now at this shooting, it's November 26th. So we have about 3 weeks-ish to get one more poll where we're at 4% or higher. So I'm guessing that's going to happen, especially with the good debate performance and the TV ads running in early states. But we're not there yet. And so if you want to make sure that we get there, don't forget to donate to the campaign. And here's a handy link for you, tinyurl.com/NFY50. This will give the Nerds for Yang channel some credit. Not like we don't get any of the money. All your money goes to the campaign, but it helps us show the campaign that this YouTube channel is helping with the Yang Gang and hopefully converting more people into supporters and donors. And that allows us to get more time with Andrew. And we are now in the process of setting up our 3rd interview with Andrew himself. If you haven't seen the first 2, go ahead and look on this channel at our most popular videos, and you'll easily find, or you could search for Nerds for Yang, Andrew Yang interview. And this 3rd interview will be a panel interview from multiple Yang Gang content creators, such as most likely, I think Paget for sure has earned herself a spot because she raised the most money for the Secure the Yang challenge. I think Kai Watson was in the running. We're not sure if he will be on the interview panel, but if you want to make sure he gets there, please donate via his ActBlue link. And then I think Hustle and Film was really close. And then there's going to be one randomly drawn from a number of other people who raised at least 500. So, but if you want to make sure that Yang has a solid 4th quarter, and ideally we can hit 30 million total, which would be 3x what we did last time. Please donate either directly to the campaign or ideally through one of our Secure the Yang ActBlue links like this one, tinyurl.com/NFY50, because Yang gets all the money, but we get the credit, which allows us to create more content with him. Okay, so you might be wondering well, why do I have to give? Let me show you. This is a look at the media coverage of the campaign up to the date of this shooting. And so we start with national evening news. So this is like World News Tonight, evening news with Jeff Glor, nightly news with Lester Holt, that kind of like the big time. establishment evening news that a lot of people watch, and you look at who most recently has been getting the most coverage, on 11/23, which is the last date I have for this data set, you see Bloomberg, Biden, and Steyer getting mentions, Yang nothing. On 11/24, I can go all the way up to 11/24, you have Bloomberg, Sanders getting mentions, Yang nothing. 11/22, Biden, Bloomberg, Warren, Steyer, Buttigieg, Harris getting mentions, Yang 0. 11/21, Biden. Ooh, look at that. Yang got 8 mentions on November 21st. Love it. Sanders, Warren, Steyer, Buttigieg. On 11/20, Biden, Sanders, Steyer, Yang nothing. 11/19, Yang nothing. 11/18, Yang nothing. 11/17, Yang nothing. So other than 11/21, where we got 8 mentions, so it was the post-debate coverage. So this is why you see how important it is to show up at these debates, because you basically get a nice boost of coverage. Unfortunately, after the debate is over, then you kind of get ignored again, at least in the national nightly news. Now, if you look at online news mentions, so this is basically a much broader set. And let's see who got the mentions here. So on November 26th, you got Biden, hundreds of mentions, Bloomberg, hundreds, Warren's, hundreds, or 150, Sanders over 100, Buttigieg over 100, even Harris almost 100. Klobuchar, Deval Patrick got more coverage than Yang on November 26th. On November 25th, you got Biden and Bloomberg over, and Warren and Sanders over 1,000 mentions. Buttigieg almost 1,000, Harris almost 1,000, Yang 189. November 24th, Biden 2,000, Bloomberg 2,000, Sanders, Warren over 1,000, Buttigieg 500. Yang, how many mentions did he get? 131. November 23rd, Biden 3,000, Sanders 1,000, Warren almost 1,000, Bloomberg almost 1,000, Buttigieg almost 1,000, Yang 73. So as you can see here, while we get a little bit more on the online news coverage, it's still around 10 times less than Buttigieg on the 23rd. On the 24th, we got a quarter of Buttigieg. On the 25th, we got about 4 or 5 times less than Buttigieg. 26th, we got a fifth of Buttigieg. So you see how the media is kind of powering who's getting the stories and who's getting coverage, which then reflects on the polls, which then affects how you get qualified for debates. And it's this kind of vicious circle where if folks like MSNBC are suppressing Yang, and I know we like to call out MSNBC, they're the most egregious, but they're not the only ones. If you look at most of the mainstream news coverage, it is vastly underreporting Yang relative to his donor support and relative to his polling support and relative to his debate performance. So that's just the reality. Which is why you should strongly consider donating to Yang, because if you do, because he had a good third quarter raise, he's now running ads in Iowa. And guess what? Now we're moving up in the polls in Iowa. And we need to do that in New Hampshire and Nevada and South Carolina as well. So I hope you'll join me in giving ideally 3 times as much in the fourth quarter, which ends at the end of December, as you did in the third quarter, which ended at the end of September. And if you're planning on doing it this quarter, don't wait till the end of the year, because $1 given to Yang 2020 today via the tinyurl.com/NFY50 or any other short link you want to use, ideally that one, $1 you give today will do way more than $1 on December 31st, because then Yang can deploy it now and start spending it in Iowa and New Hampshire, and doesn't have to wait till January if you give it to him on December 31st. Okay, now let's look at, so we talked about how he isn't getting a lot of media coverage, but do people want to hear about Yang? So let's look at the search activity for the different candidates. So here is the Google Trends report for the last 30 days in the US, who are people searching for? Most popular is last 30 days would be Bernie. And if I say last 7 days, just to make it even more recent, it would be Buttigieg, Bernie, and Yang. Now, you notice that Yang has a little more than half of the interest than as there is in Buttigieg, and almost 2/3 of the interest as there is in Sanders. But if you recall, he's not getting the mainstream media coverage relative to all of these people searching for him. And if you look at YouTube searches, you see who's getting interest on YouTube, who are people searching for on YouTube. When you compare Yang, Buttigieg, Harris, Warren, and Sanders, number one is Yang. So he gets more YouTube searches than Bernie and Buttigieg almost combined. That's the blue line here. But what you also know, as we talked about in the last analysis, is that nightly news, online news are not covering Yang, barely scraping the surface, even though so many people are interested in him. What if you say, well, what about the last 30 days? Were people interested in Yang in the last 30 days? Yes, still number one for the last 30 days. Number two would be Sanders, and then Warren, and then Buttigieg. So this blue line shows extremely strong interest in Yang. And it's kind of BS that MSNBC, Rachel Maddow, Chuck Todd, Lester Holt, New York Times, they're barely covering this guy. It's so frustrating. Now, if you look at web search the last 30 days, just to keep it real, agreed, we're not number one. We're this blue bar here, but we're not 1/10 the size of the red bar, which is the coverage we're getting, the relative difference in coverage we're getting. So if we get almost as much web searches as Buttigieg, why are we getting only 1/10 of his coverage in mainstream media? Now, if you drill down out of the US and you say you want to look at Iowa, I think this is where it gets closer. But okay, you got Buttigieg with very strong Iowa search interest. But you know, Yang is not that far behind, just about a little less than half. It's not 1/10. And then if you look at YouTube searches, I don't know if we're going to have enough data for Iowa YouTube. We are number one in Iowa YouTube searches. So now you go to New Hampshire. Last 30 days, Harris and Warren are doing well, but Yang is right behind, just a few points off of Harris, and way more YouTube searching for Yang than Buttigieg in New Hampshire. If you look at web searches in New Hampshire, you'll see Buttigieg is leading the way with Yang about half. Again, like even if you take this as your North Star, half the web searches doesn't seem to me to suggest that you cover him 1/10 of the time in mainstream media. And the problem is that most voters get their information not from web searches or from YouTube. They get it from nightly news, cable news, and that's where the bias against Yang is really hurting us, and which is why we need to offset that with donating to the campaign so that we can basically buy access to the voters so that they can get the information they need to make the best decision. Okay, so that is media coverage, and now we'll look at Twitter growth on social media. Here you have Twitter growth between Buttigieg, Warren, and Yang. The purple line is Warren, red is Yang, and this light blue is Buttigieg. What you'll notice is the gap between the blue and the red, Buttigieg and Yang, seems to be getting narrower and narrower as time goes on, meaning that the Yang gang is growing on Twitter and following Andrew on Twitter more than the Mayor Pete supporters are following him. So he's not adding as many new supporters as we are day by day. At the same time, you see the gap between the red and the purple. That's actually flat, or you could even say Warren might be recently kind of gaining. And let's look at the daily additions. Here, let's say on November 25th, Yang added 2,000 more than Buttigieg and Warren. On November 24th, Yang added 5,000, 4 times more than Buttigieg and Warren. November 23rd was close to tied, but Yang was still number one. 22nd, Yang is number one. So like on Twitter, at least for the last few days, we have been crushing it. And I think that's why you see us closing in. So again, you got to ask yourself, we're leading on Twitter ads between Buttigieg and Warren. We are very close for web searches. We are leading on YouTube searches. So why is MSNBC, NBC, CBS, why aren't they covering Yang more? Why do they keep covering people like Booker and Buttigieg? I don't get it. So let me know in the comments below if you think you have any theories, but the data suggests that he should be getting way more coverage. Okay, next and last, we'll do November betting odds, and then we'll wrap this up because it's been a good while, and I know even though I love data, you can only digest so much, so we'll probably have to clipify this video as well in subsequent days. Okay. So let's look at election betting odds. So we'll start with the predicted. I know a lot of you guys like to use predicted. So you've got Yang. Ooh, 8 cents on the dollar. That's actually better than before. So that's kind of like a 1 in 12 chance, which is way stronger than we've seen in the past. But you've got Bloomberg more likely, according to gamblers. Sanders twice as likely. That's actually half as likely as Sanders to win the nomination is pretty good for Andrew Yang. We've pulled away from Hillary, doubled Harris. So that's nice. And what you also see here is no one's locked in. You don't see anyone at a 50% kind of yes price. So that's really exciting. Let's see what else we got here. If you look at the another source, the presidential betting odds, election betting odds by John Stossel and team, let's say the last week, you've got Biden at 21% likely to get the primary nomination ahead of Warren and Buttigieg and Sanders. Bloomberg at 7, Yang at 3. So that's not as fun of a chart to look at, but it's the reality. So let's take a look at it. And if we say the last month, what you see is a steady downward trend of Warren, who might have peaked in late October. And she keeps dropping. Wow. The gamblers are not happy with Warren. Nice kind of steady, slow growth for Biden over the last month. Buttigieg moving up nicely. But Sanders, he's got that solid base of support. He's not really going anywhere. And then you got Yang here. Well, on the good news is we used to be like stuck in this bottom clump area. So we're now kind of in this almost second tier, if you say this first clump is the first tier. So that's nice, but obviously the trend is not the way we want to look. So if you look at the maximum time scale, you see Yang is this now magenta looking color. I think the biggest thing when you look at it all the way back to March of this year is you see this huge rise of Warren through October, and then this crash. My God, that would suck to be a Warren supporter. This does not look like a good trend. And this purple is the Buttigieg line. You see, he was as high as 15% likelihood of getting the nomination. Then he kind of dropped all the way down to 5, and now he's back up to 18. And this is in a matter of just a few months. So anything can happen. Remember that the Iowa caucus is how many days from now? Remember that the Iowa caucus is in 69 days. So we have time to catch up, because if you look at this chart, you can see that in 69 days, basically a little over 2 months, this purple line Buttigieg went from close to 5 to 18. So could Yang go from 3 to 15? Maybe. And would that put us in like 3rd or 4th place in Iowa? Who knows? It's possible. So that is the gambling odds. So in summary, what I'm going to say is very encouraging news in the latest Iowa polls. Pretty good news in the national polls. We need to work harder in New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. Demographically, strangely enough, Biden and Bernie are the candidates of minority voters. So we've got work to do there. But we do well with younger voters, and we do well with people who care about the economy, which I think is an important thing to care about. So congrats to all the Yang Gang and to Andrew, of course, on a really great showing at the debate. I feel like for the opportunities he got, he really made the best of them. And that media coverage is just bullshit. As you know, we looked at the last week of coverage, and he is getting way less coverage than the data shows us in terms of Google searches, YouTube searches, and Twitter followers. So if everybody's searching for him and everybody's looking for content about him, why isn't the media providing it? Why do they keep going back to Booker? Why do they keep going to Buttigieg? Why do they keep going to Warren? Why do they ignore Yang? And regardless of why, what are we going to do about it? We need to offset it, and we need to overpower the media by basically funding our own information campaign so people can become more aware of him. Because the other key thing is that about half of voters have not made up their mind, and they're open. And of those who support Warren and Buttigieg, they don't feel as strongly in support of them, which means they're kind of like vulnerable to potentially coming over to the Yang Gang, whereas the Yang Gang is very solid. Most of our supporters are have already decided we're for Yang all the way. So hope that was interesting to you. We will see you next time. Goodbye, nerds.